So let's continue on. So that is Python here. Oh, I guess I should mention this. Some resources, this is on the notebook that I shared from before. Some sources that you should look out for, especially as we go throughout the course. One is the curriculum on Canvas, of course, like actually reading that curriculum. The Python Data Science Handbook, which I'll send in this chat right now. This is a really great book. It's actually freely available online. The author, Jake Vanderplas, data scientist, he has actually written a lot of code for scikit-learn, which we'll use later on and everything like that. There we go. And it's actually freely available. It's really great. Like I would say like this first, especially these first 3 to 4 chapters will be really good for this phase. Like if you read and understand this completely, like you're golden for like phase 1. Now that does not mean extra homework for you to do right now, like, okay, this weekend, go read this whole thing. I actually say this is actually a great resource even after finishing the course. I'll even reference it, especially things like I'm not really great with plotting. Like it just, for some reason, just messes with my head with Python. This is a really great resource that actually shows you a lot about how these things work. And then, of course, he also has a section on machine learning, which we'll talk about in phase 3 or whatever. But it's a freely available resource. You can buy the book online, or like you can buy the book, a physical book if you prefer that, support the author. But he also has said just use it if you want it. It's freely available. And also he writes the code. So you'll notice these chapters, like for example, let me just open up a chapter here. You can see that there's actual, well, that's part. There's some actual code and stuff like this. You can actually find all of this code and resources on his GitHub. So you can actually download the specific notebook and work on that specifically and actually, play around with it and things like that. And for the record, there's this open and collab, which I won't go over today, but just know it's kind of like an online Jupyter notebook, and you could actually code online and never have to even like download the notebook. But something to look over and stuff like that in the future. Okay. Let's see here. Kaggle. Who's heard of Kaggle before? All right, I see a couple hands. All right, Kaggle is a great community. Like it's basically a community for data scientists. They're mostly known for Kaggle competitions, where basically data scientists, machine learning engineers compete to make the best model possible to sometimes win prizes, but sometimes win lots of money. But it's also really great. It's turned into a really great resource for just asking data scientists and other people on Kaggle and say, hey, like I have this question, what about this? Or sharing your work, like, a notebook and stuff like this. It's also a really great resource when we start looking for data sets. They have a lot of data sets available. And they're actually usually relatively clean too. And what's nice is that there's a voting system. So you can usually see the highly voted data sets are pretty useful and like kind of nice to use and stuff like that to play around with. So a good resource to check out. And then Stack Overflow, which I think as Sam L had mentioned, like search for things found on Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is a great place to find answers. Note that sometimes the answers can be a little really too technical, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. My general thing is usually I'll search for something, and one of like the top 5, if not the top result, is a Stack Overflow question, like literally, or answer that's literally asking the same question that I'm wondering about. So good to know how to use that and everything like that. You can even ask questions on there yourself, but I almost like never have to do that. I was like just like be able to search it, and I'm able to find the question on Stack Overflow itself. But be aware, there's sometimes you look for a question and it just never gets answered, and sometimes that happens too. Usually, like in this scenario, again, XKCD, you might come across this when you start diving some weird type stuff. Usually that means you have to just kind of rephrase your question. If it's really deep and detailed, you might be on an island that only you exist on, unfortunately, which does happen sometimes in data science. But in general, you can see what other people have asked, and you just have to, if you come across like a question that no one's answered from that point, or you can't find any information on it, you might just have to rephrase your question. Okay, cool. So some resources I just wanted to point out, especially that data science handbook that I put in the chat. All right, so that completes this little notebook on intro. Woo, yeah. So now we are purely into